what's something you don't see much in the writing group that you'd like to see more of? Could be genres, types of characters, types of stories, such as dialogue heavy or setting heavy, anything you want. So, very open-ended. Like, it can even be like, I want people to write more about snakes. Like, I don't see enough snake stories. Kind of thing. Oh yes, tropes. That's a great idea. Tropes, genres, tropes, types of characters, types of stories. It could even be like I guess maybe I'll give part of my answer right away. But I remember there's I ended up not completing it, at least not yet. But I was going through the website and posting the prompt intros to the older forums, and Benji at one point in around the Halloween time was okay, we got a lot of dark stories last time. We can have another dark prompt. It's okay. But basically the idea of last one, guys, but here's another dark prompt. And then the next one he was like, okay, you voted for another dark one. All right, it's fine. That kind of thing. And I was sitting there looking at that and being like, that'll never end, Benji. And so that kind of thing too. That's definitely something I would agree with, that I would love to see more wholesome stories, because I feel like our brains are pretty dark, and that's totally fine, and that can be fun as well, but I would love to see more stories on the actually fluffy end. So that's an option too, of the emotion of the story or the vibe of the story. Why am I doing a dance? Doing the Rumpelstiltskin thing. But anyways. Aw, Mako, I try to write wholesome stuff whenever I can. That's fair. And I mean, I'm a culprit too, because I also write dark stuff. I also like the angst. Just kind of but answering the question of what I want to see more of, that is something I want to see more of. But anyways, I will see you guys in a bit. I need to pull up the music because I did not start with it. Here we go. Okie dokie. I will see you guys in a little bit. I've been looking through the comments, and there's some great ones here. Alright, so let's start with the Discord chat. Massa says, something I thought of immediately was immersive stories, and that is really hard to pull off. I'm just as guilty. When you only have 350 words, one of the first things that gets cut is description, so that is hard to accomplish. One person that I know does a really good job of it, though, is Luna. Anyway, I may be asking a bit too much. Very fair, Luna does do a great job. Also, why do we have Flesh Horse in the chats? Is there lag happening? But yeah, I don't really know how to accomplish that, because I feel like the issue is, I guess I'd say that little Lady Eva did accomplish that for me earlier today, that that story includes a lot of setting details that make me feel very immersed in it, and yet it also manages to be what it is, and manages to have dialogue and action and stuff like that. So I guess maybe that's a template if that's what you're going for. But I feel like a lot of the time our struggle is either that's your whole story, it's just description, or you have to cut it all out because you need those words to tell the story. So, I mean, that could definitely be a challenge. I'll write it down, immersive, include setting. Eddie says, this might sound mean, but more standalone stories that don't rely on knowing the setting would be one for me. It's so common to write sequels and side stories and universes from previous stories that when I wrote a story where the only characters were him and her, I got comments asking if those were supposed to be Hades and Persephone, meaning there's almost an expectation to continue writing in the same universe, even when it's not denoted in the title. So, since I don't always stop to read too many stories, hyperactivity and all that, the end result is a feeling of, oh, I missed an episode. Now I don't know what's going on in the series when I drop into another story later on. So, I mean, that's fair, and, I think somebody says the opposite here in the public chat, and so that's totally fair if that's something that's frustrating to you, or something that, you would prefer. And I just realized as I'm about to, I'll still ask this, but I realized as I'm about to ask this, you might have meant something different. But my question for that was going to be, how do we make them stand alone then? Because I think it's always everyone's intention to make their stories stand alone. And it can just be really hard to do that. And that's something that I kind of try to comment on in the streams and go, oh, hey, this made your story not stand alone, or this required too much context, or this required more context, and that kind of thing. But I feel like for... I mean, I said my praises and critiques for each of them, but I feel like Little Lady Eva's story worked, even if you didn't read the previous one. And I feel like with Marx's, you can get, into the feeling of, like, oh, I feel, so bad for Xander, even if you don't really know what's going on. And then I commented on the parts of those stories that didn't work, and that kind of thing. And, same with Aerith's as well. And so, that's always the goal. At least as someone who writes in an ongoing universe, it's always the goal to make them stand alone. We just don't always succeed. And so, if you know how to help us succeed in that, I would love to know more about how to make them stand alone better. But I realized right before I asked this that maybe what you meant is don't write in the universe. Don't not try to make the stories in the universe stand alone. You're wanting to see more one-offs. You're wanting to see more stories that are just their own thing, not part of a universe. And if so, that's fair, and I can't really argue against that or anything. That's completely fair. So there are many things I'd like to see more occasionally in the writing group. Westerns, spy thrillers, historical fiction, epistolary fiction / diary entries. We all tend towards fantasy, horror, comedy, and some romance. Sci-fi is definitely rarer, especially hard sci-fi. I'll also second Eddie's comment. It's a bit easier for me because I'm more setting-minded than character-minded when writing for the writing group. It's why I've struggled to try out my new unrelated to the world story setting in a piece. That project is more storyline based, and I know it'll be confusing. No lag on my end. Oh, you mean you you don't have as much trouble writing standalone stories or making them standalone because you focus more on the setting. That's interesting. Yeah, but that's a great point. And there's also something that you didn't mention in there that I would like to add: pirate stories. But yes, I'd love to see any of those things that we do tend to stick to: fantasy, horror, comedy, romance, and some sci-fi. Yeah, and that's a good point that I'm like, oh, we don't always write sci-fi. It's like, yeah, we write westerns less. I guess that's why Solo Adrian's story from a while back about Billy the Kid really stuck out to me, because it was a western. But, yep, totally agree about all of those. Yes, more pirates. Exactly. I think I say that every time like a pirate or mermaid story comes up. I'm like, I love those pirates and mermaids. Give me more pirates and mermaids and sirens, etc. Um let's see here. So something that frustrated me was the one time I wrote a sci-fi story meant to be a day in the life of a mercenary in a soft sci-fi universe, and the criticisms I got were mostly about it not being scientifically accurate. I think each person comes from a different background in terms of preference. It's hard to showcase if it's soft or hard sci-fi in 3 to 50 words or less. That's a good point, yeah. And I think people are... that can be a struggle because different people have different minds, and people have different suspensions of disbelief, and mine is quite high, and so I can generally be like, oh yeah, like maybe that doesn't make logical sense, but I don't care, I'm having a good time. And then other people will be like, no, this really bothers me, like I can't get into the story because this logically doesn't make sense. And so that could have been a part of the issue there, that like, you're getting people who are like, this isn't, what did you say about it? Scientifically accurate. They were like, that they're more scientifically minded and going, this isn't scientifically accurate. I guess in that case, like, I do wonder if you had been clear that it was a soft sci-fi universe, if those people would have still made those comments just because that's how their brain works. Then maybe their brain isn't as wired for soft sci-fi, but it's definitely, I don't know. I don't really have a moral to the story. It's just a thing I've noticed. But I'm sorry you didn't get the comments that you wanted on that particular day. Remaking the stories more standalone. I don't want to point fingers, but from time to time I see stories that assume we know characters' backgrounds and quirks, going for more indirect nods to those characteristics in new stories than repeating direct descriptions. Like, say, one story introduces Bob the Vampire, but then the next story just make nods about Bob being pale and having a cloak. Yeah, those are vampirical characteristics, but they don't necessarily explain what is going on in the new story. I'd be curious to know more of what you mean by that, because I feel like it might be a sense of like, I get what you're saying, but maybe the example wasn't the best, because I don't feel like you need to know what a character, like I often talk about, you don't need to know what the characters look like, sort of thing. We need to know who Bob the Vampire is more than what Bob is wearing, But like, so let me think for a second. Cause like I have so many thoughts going through my head from that, because so thought one is like, if you have a description of a character and you repeat that character for every story that you write for the writing group, well, you're not going to have regular readers because they're all going to get tired of you repeating the same description. And so it's like, I totally get being like, okay, these stories need to stand alone, and so if you described who they were in your introduction to them, you probably should describe who they are now because it's somebody's introduction to them. But at the same time, I feel like that, I guess for me, like, I do my best to make my story stand alone, and I'm always asking, like, are newcomers going to be confused by this? How do I make it less confusing? Where were your issues in that regard? But if I have to lean one way or another, I'm going to cater to my regular readers, because these are the people who are like reading me and reviewing me every week. And of course I want newcomers to read me, and of course I want them to have a good time and enjoy the story and not be confused by it. But if I have to pick one, I'm going to pick the people who are dedicated to me. And so in that case, in the sense of like, I'm not going to repeat the same description over and over again because I don't want to lose my regular readers, you know what I mean? But at the same time, like, I get what you're saying of like, if you're like, how do I want to describe this? That, in the sense of like, here's Bob the vampire, and like in your first story you're like, okay, this is what Bob is like, here's what you need to know to understand the story here and understand Bob. It's like, all right, I understand Bob. And then the next story you're like, this character did this thing, and then all the regular readers are like, that's our Bob. And then anybody who's new is like, this character did what now? Why? You know, I totally get it in that regard. But I also feel like another thing that I was thinking about reading that is that there's a sense of like, because you were using like physical description as an example. Like, you can have a character that, and just have a physical description that denotes, oh yeah, this is that character, without like alienating newcomers, if that makes sense. I feel like you can have it be like, oh yes, this person wore these wizard's robes and stuff like that, and like anyone who knows the story, or no, it would be this person wore this cloak and it was like red at the bottom. We're like, that's Bob. But anybody who doesn't know would just go like, oh yeah, here's our guy in a cloak. And as long as like we don't need to know it's Bob to understand the story, I think that cloak detail works. I think it works as like, okay, that's a nod for people who know the story, but for people who don't, it doesn't detract. It's just like, oh yeah, here's Bob. Here's this cloak wearing dude. You know what I mean? I don't know. I don't know. Wait, what's going on? Did something go wrong, or is it only going wrong on Mako's end? Yeah, totally. Eddie says, maybe using epithets to help. Like when I introduce Pasithea in a story as goddess of hallucinations, and folks in the comments are like, oh, I get it. Would not have understood without that bit. Yeah, that's a perfect idea. And actually, we're going to kind of talk about that in the next story. But yeah, that totally could be great. That's saying like, oh yeah, Pasithea. Everybody knows who that is, and then newcomers are like, I don't know who that is. But if you're like, the goddess of hallucinations walked in, everybody will be like, newcomers will be like, okay, and regular readers will be like, yep, that's Pasithea, for sure. Massa says, I admit there are a few stories where I won't bring up that Erica is an orc because a lot of the times it's not necessary to know. So it probably comes as a surprise to people who found out she isn't human when it comes up. So I get it. I was surprised the first time. I was like, oh, she's an orc? But I think that's also a good thing to do. It kind of goes back to, should you tell us she's a cat girl, from Mako's story for last week, that in that story it was not relevant that she was a cat girl, and so it wasn't brought up. And so that's definitely something that's good to keep in mind, that it's like, is this larger universe thing important to bring up? And of course, sometimes it can be hard to tell because you're too close, but especially getting like beta readers and stuff like that, they can help you go, no, I think you can leave that off, or like, actually that's really important to note this time.
Kitty, you want out? No? Okay.
All right. Let's see what folks have been saying in the stream chat. Little Lady Eva says, for what I want to see more of, I know I personally have been trying to experiment with writing more realistic real-life stories, maybe even personal anecdotes. Very fair. That's kind of what I've been saying in these past few streams, that I've been enjoying those realistic stories and would love to see more of them too. Reincarnator, a challenge to make an absolutely wholesome prompt title into something terrible. My dude, that's not a challenge. That's not a challenge for this group. The challenge would be the opposite. Make something that, just makes you want to do something horrible and angsty into something fluffy and wholesome. Then again, I feel like when things are extreme, people will go to extremes. And so I guess the challenge is more as a baseline, as neutral, go something wholesome. Because I totally feel like people have done that, where it's like a horrible, terrifying prompt, and people do something wholesome. And there's a wholesome prompt, and people do horrible things with it. So yeah, I think the real challenge would be neutral prompt. I know your baseline is to go to darkness, but do wholesome things. Mako said, honestly though, maybe I'm just dead tired, but I can't really think of anything but stuff that's fun. Wait, what about more people writing in an ongoing universe? It'd be nice to be able to become more invested in more characters. Yeah, so this was the answer that's the opposite of what Eddie said, that you'd like to see more people write in ongoing universes. So I think that that does show that we have people on both sides of the spectrum, and so some people are like, there's a little too many, and it does make sense, because I think Mako is someone who reads people's stories every week, and as Eddie was saying, Eddie's not necessarily someone who reads them every week, and so maybe for somebody who's regularly reading them, it's like, I want something regular, I want an ongoing universe, and for somebody who pops in from time to time, it's like, I could stand less of the ongoing universes. Kansas says, simply dragons. That is fantastic. Always good to see more dragons. Mark says, well, I for one see a disturbingly small, one might say. Let's restart. Well, I for one see a disturbingly small, one might say non-existent, stories with jellyfish and the bags they call home. Seriously, though, I do really enjoy the prompts that are in jokes. There's this extra layer of fun to them. I do agree, it is fun when with the flesh horse and stuff like that. And we have never gotten "Yo, I'm a moth" as a prompt, but that would be fun as well, especially because of the new name and everything. But I love that. I'm not sure what you're talking about, Mako. Give me the jellyfish. I know what you're talking about there. That's interesting. Redrove says, what I lack are normal moments. Not necessarily fun or wholesome, but not big or important either. I know stories are supposed to have a point. We're all excited to share the vengeance, the triumph, the reunion, etc. In 350 words, it's near impossible to send all those emotions through. Find tiny normal moments more effective and simple, and better to set up characters for an ongoing narrative. Ooh, that could be a fun challenge too. I'll say mundane moments. That's a really good point, and something I'll have to consider, because I feel like I run into that trap, I guess, where I'm always thinking I gotta write something big and cool that people are gonna be excited about, not a Tuesday. But that's a good point, that a Tuesday can potentially be better for 350 words and might stand alone better and convey the characters better and everything, for sure. The bag jellyfish will win one day. The flesh horse commands it so. Well, I guess I will note that, and it didn't win. It didn't even get top 3, as far as I know. And so I think because it's been consistently not winning, I'm not gonna keep submitting it as my guaranteed prompt, my transformed prompt. I can still submit it as just in the list of prompts. But if people aren't into it enough to make it win or even make it get second, then I feel like it's not worth it to keep using my guaranteed on that. But if you guys are like, please, no, I will vote for it next time, then let me know. Also note, I have the slightest clue what I'll do for that prompt. It's already won. It's written in the stars. We just await that truth to become today. Amazing. Little Lady Eva seems to be agreeing with Eddie. I was actually thinking less in universe stories and more one-shots. Making a consistent universe that can create standalone stories is difficult. It can mess me up that people don't remember. I'm not sure what you mean by that second part. But Wolf, I always vote for jellyfish in a bag. Fair. So yeah, you're agreeing that you'd like to see more one-offs. Gotcha. Regis says, ooh, I feel that, but I will stay with my answer for normal moments simply because there's less pressure and less necessary context I feel in everyday happenings. Very fair. Like I said, that could be an easier way to write in an ongoing universe, but have it work, a little bit better as the mundane moments. Mark says, maybe making a new spin-off of the extended universe. That way those of us who want to write in the same universe technically can, but with new characters. I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that. Like, I mean, I know what like a spin-off is, but I don't know what you're addressing. I'm very quiet. Oh, no. Sorry. Oh, interesting. Corian says, I'd also like to see more stuff similar to Studio Ghibli. Cozy fantasy. I know that we see it here. This is something I want to write more myself. I'll write that down too. But yeah, that's a good point, that we like our horrific fantasy, but what about cozy fantasy? Like that story that Boople wrote about, like the raven in the old witch's house, that sort of thing. Oh, interesting. Death says, you know what? I'd like to see more collaboration. For one, it would be neat to see other authors take a crack at writing one another's characters a setting. For a second, letting one another critique rough drafts would help make the published tale stronger. Feel free to take or leave this idea. Go ahead and do that. Like, I don't know if you guys would prefer to have... Well, I was going to say, I don't know if you guys would prefer to have a rough draft forum, but that's kind of what you have in the writing workshop. I don't know if having, like, a rough draft forum inside of the writing group section would feel different to you and would encourage you more in a different way. But that is something I could do and, like, make a place for it. Just see Boople. You remember that? Why? Because it was dang cute. Because it was great. I loved it. And also because I have a good memory. I also think it's extra funny that I didn't even know you were here. You were just lurking in the background like, wait. Oh, incredible. But yeah, so that first part of like writing each other's universes and stuff, I've often thought of like the idea of making that either a Secret Santa or like one of the special prompts, basically, that it's like, I think making that a challenge is like it's too big of a thing to do, I think, to make it just like a challenge, an addendum. So I think it would have to be like an event of some sort, be it like the redo a prompt, Mr. Prompt thing, or be it in like a Secret Santa that you write in the universe of whoever you got. But I like that too. I have done that, and anybody can choose to do that in any week if they want, but I have done that before, and it has been very fun each time, and that would be, it's always great to see how different people, write each other's universes. And then, yeah, like, even if I don't make, like, a forum for it, you guys can totally post, like, your Google Docs in the writing group chat and stuff like that. Next April Fools. That's so long, though. You guys are like, jellyfish for next April Fools? It's for next April Fools? I'm like, my guys, that's a year. I don't know if I can wait a year. But anyways, and then Marks agrees. Collaborations or crossovers would be cool, actually. Yeah, crossovers would be another question that crossovers would be combining the universes instead of like writing about each other's separately. Um, Corian says, I think that sounds fun, but I don't know enough of others' characters in order to pull it off. Yeah, that is the danger of it, especially if it was like a prompt or something, is that like either some people won't feel like they know enough about each other's universes to write in them, um, or like you'll have to do research and maybe that's a little too time consuming for that week. Um, I don't know if it like I don't know if that was like a prompt or something like that. If it would work better to just be like, be free, do whoever you want, as opposed to like assigning them. But that could help, with feeling like, okay, I feel comfortable writing in this universe because I chose what universe to write in. But it could have the problem of everybody writing in one, and then people not feeling like appreciated because they didn't get their universe written about, whereas a Secret Santa would guarantee. So I don't know. There's issues and dangers, but also fun. I guess as we're talking about it, maybe it would be best as a challenge. Maybe it would be better as just like an optional thing to do if you can and you want to, kind of thing. Kaylee's really dying for a pirate story. Me too, Kaylee. Me too. Exactly. I mean, come on, guys. Bring me that horizon. I am shocked that one is always low because I'm like, but the pirates though. Prompt: Universal musical chairs trade universes with someone. Gosh, that would be a nightmare to organize. Yeah, that is part of the concern. I mean, I think I guess maybe I can't say this about myself, but I think I'm pretty good at organizing stuff like that. Like I love organizing events and everything. So I think if like especially if it's a Secret Santa and not a prompt, I don't think I could do it in a single week. But if it's like a Secret Santa that I had like a month to organize or something like that, then I probably could have people say like, I can write in this person's universe, I can write in this person's universe, and hopefully pair people up. Imagine Challenger, it has to be a mundane piece like an office. Yeah, exactly. I did write that down. Gotcha. Miko opened the stream and it was paused on his end. Ghoulish says, I say that as someone who's done a universe swap. Ghoulish says, mainly because of the 3 universe swaps I've done, only one person has written in my worlds other than me, and 2 others dropped out. Aww. Dang. But yeah, that is part of the concern, like I was saying, that like if people can choose, then you might not get your universe written about. And I guess that is the issue of Secret Santas too, that people do drop out of Secret Santas. Jellyfish seem like a wonderful aesthetic to write in. Amazing. Kansas says, I gotta go pack. We're moving soon. Have a good rest of the stream, everyone. Oh, now I'm curious where you're moving to. But yes, I hope you have a good day. I take that challenge. Which challenge? The like writing each other's universes thing. So I would say that if I ever do like make this a challenge or make it an actual like sanctioned event or something like that, you have to make sure people are okay with it first, because I don't think everybody will be okay about writing in each other's universes or somebody writing in their universe. And also, sometimes people will be like, okay, you can write about my universe, but I have some caveats, like I don't like when people write about this character or something like that. So you have to make sure people are okay with it first. Get consent. I need to finish making that intro to my universe collection. I've got like 100 more stories since I started. That could be interesting. I don't know how we could make it work, but it'd be kind of interesting if we had like a channel for here's your intro to people's universes. I guess it would be like a forum channel of like intro to universes. So if you want to get into a certain writer's universe, you can just go to that channel and read about the background of the universe and stuff like that. Granted, as we've been saying, they should stand alone, so you shouldn't have to. But it just could be a fun thing for, like, if you want to, you can go learn about their universes, and you don't have to, like, go through a backlog of, hundreds of stories to figure anything out. It could be fun for an event. Like, if we get more than 1 week, we could organize the swapping more efficiently. Very fair. Always down to seeing what people do with my character's universe, Mako says. Nice. All right. Well, this has been a great conversation.